Welcome back to Stories by Prosper. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and get ready for another story you won't forget. Let's dive back to the story. Mirabel Lawson never felt like a bride on her wedding day. Instead, she felt like a prisoner chained to a fate she hadn't chosen. Her marriage to Raymond Morgan was forced by family influence, the kind that cared more about alliances and reputation than about love. From the very start, Raymond made it clear he had no affection for her. His cold stares on the wedding day, the absent smile, the stiff vows, everything screamed rejection. In her heart, Mirabel had hoped that with time things might change, that perhaps bearing his child would soften his bitterness. But she was wrong. Instead, Raymond grew harsher with every passing day, hurling words that pierced deeper than knives. "I never wanted you," he would sneer. "You were imposed on me." He flaunted his disdain openly, finding comfort in Selina Roberts, his glamorous mistress, while Mirabel drowned in loneliness. The mansion, though big and beautiful, echoed with emptiness, and her daughter, Danielle, was the only light in the darkness. Mirabel poured every ounce of love into Danielle, clinging to her child as the only proof she still had a purpose in this cruel marriage. Raymond, on the other hand, lived a double life, one where Selina painted his nights with luxury and desire, while Mirabel was left starving emotionally and financially. He provided no money for the household, no care for Danielle, and no compassion for Mirabel. To him, they were nothing but burdens he carried unwillingly. And yet, society admired him as a hard-working man and a responsible husband. Nobody knew the truth, for Mirabel had kept silent, swallowing her tears and putting on a brave face for the world. But behind closed doors, her life was a torment, and Danielle was her only reason not to break completely. She prayed every day that God would touch Raymond's heart, but her prayers went unanswered. Instead, Raymond spent more nights out with Selina, leaving Mirabel to wonder if fate had cursed her to suffer endlessly in a loveless marriage. She didn't know then that her suffering was only beginning, and that one day she would be tested in a way no mother should ever face. Danielle Morgan, barely 8 years old, carried an innocence that could melt even the hardest heart, yet her father never once held her close. With her bright eyes and gentle laughter, she was a spitting image of Mirabel, but Raymond saw her as nothing more than an extension of a woman he despised. Whenever Danielle ran to him for a hug, he brushed her aside as if she were invisible, his heart too consumed with thoughts of Selina. Still, Danielle adored her father, always telling her mother, "One day, Daddy will love me." Mirabel's heart ached at her daughter's hope, for she knew Raymond had no love to give. He had long buried it under arrogance and resentment. Mirabel tried her best to shield Danielle from the truth. She sang her to sleep with lullabies, cooked with what little money she scraped together, and kept a smile on her face, even when her stomach was empty. Many nights, Mirabel starved so Danielle could eat. Yet even in hardship, Danielle smiled, drawing flowers on scraps of paper and telling her mother, "These are for you, Mommy. When we're happy one day, I'll give you a real garden." That garden became Mirabel's motivation to keep going, even though every day with Raymond felt like living in a storm. But storms never last forever, or so she hoped. What she didn't know was that fate was preparing to shatter even the little garden of hope Danielle had planted in her heart. Selina Roberts was everything Raymond admired, tall, beautiful, and seductive, with a sharp tongue that dripped with venom toward Mirabel. She often accompanied Raymond to his home, not as a visitor, but as though she were the true mistress of the mansion. She walked around like a queen, sneering at Mirabel, and Raymond encouraged her arrogance by laughing at her mockeries. "Look at her," Selina would say, pointing at Mirabel, "working like a housemaid, yet she calls herself a wife. Pathetic." Mirabel endured it silently, but each insult cut into her soul. She didn't complain because Danielle was always nearby, and she didn't want her daughter to see her pain. One day, Selina took it further. She offered Mirabel a degrading deal. Work for her in her own home as a maid in exchange for a few pennies. Desperate for money to buy Danielle food and medicine, Mirabel agreed. Selina mocked her endlessly, commanding her to scrub floors and serve drinks while Raymond laughed. It was humiliation beyond measure, serving her husband's mistress in her own house, reduced to the status of a servant just to keep her child alive. At night, Mirabel cried into her pillow, whispering prayers that seemed to vanish into thin air. But what could she do? With no family support and no job, she had no choice but to bow her head and endure. It was the ultimate test of a mother's sacrifice. But deep inside, Something was beginning to break. Danielle had always been lively, but one cold evening, her laughter was replaced by coughing fits that shook her fragile body. At first, Mirabel thought it was just a fever, but soon Danielle grew weaker, barely able to stand. Panic gripped Mirabel as she rushed her to the hospital, clutching her daughter in trembling arms. The doctors examined Danielle and confirmed her worst fear. The illness was severe and required immediate treatment. The bill was beyond what she could ever afford. "We need a deposit to begin," the doctor insisted, his tone firm. "Without it, we cannot proceed." Mirabel's heart sank. She ran back home to beg Raymond for help, but he was out with Selena, dancing the night away at a party. She called and called, but he ignored her pleas. When he finally returned in the early hours, smelling of alcohol and perfume, she fell to her knees, begging him to save their child. Raymond's response was ice cold. "I won't waste money on burdens. If she's weak, that's not my problem." He walked away without looking back, leaving Mirabel shattered on the floor. With no choice, she returned to Selena, offering once more to serve like a slave if it meant saving her daughter. Selena smirked, pretended to agree, then dismissed her with empty promises. The walls of Mirabel's world were closing in, and Danielle's life was slipping through her fingers. Mirabel tried everything, borrowing from neighbors, pleading with church members, even selling her jewelry, but nothing came close to the required amount. All the while, Raymond spent lavishly on Selena, buying her dresses and jewelry, throwing parties to show her off. The hypocrisy burned in Mirabel's chest. Danielle lay in the hospital bed, pale and gasping for breath, while her father showered another woman with the money that could have saved her. It was betrayal on a scale Mirabel could not comprehend. She was losing her child, and the man responsible was indifferent. When she confronted Raymond one last time, hoping against hope he would relent, his cruelty reached its peak. He dragged Selena into their living room, poured himself a drink, and said mockingly, "If you want money, work harder as her maid. I have no responsibility to you or that girl." Selena laughed and added, "Better still, why not leave? Raymond doesn't need you. He already has me." Mirabel's knees weakened, and tears streamed down her face. Danielle's condition worsened daily, and Mirabel began to realize that the man she once hoped would change was nothing more than a monster in human skin. The hospital room was filled with the beeping of machines and the faint cries of a child fighting for her life. Danielle's small hands clutched her mother's weakly, her lips trembling as she whispered, "Mommy, don't cry. I'll be fine." But Mirabel knew her daughter's strength was fading. She begged the doctors to proceed with treatment, promising she would find a way to pay. The doctors shook their heads helplessly. "Without the deposit, there's nothing we can do." Just when Mirabel thought things couldn't get worse, Raymond walked into the hospital room, not with money or compassion, but with a stack of papers. His face was void of emotion as he tossed them onto her lap. "Sign the divorce papers," he said coldly. "I'm done with you and that sick child. You're nothing but dead weight, and you stink of poverty." Mirabel's cries echoed through the room as she pleaded, "At least save Danielle first. Please, she's your daughter." But Raymond ignored her, sneering as Selena waited at the door, smirking with satisfaction. That night, the image of Raymond handing her divorce papers at her daughter's deathbed was seared into Mirabel's soul, a scar that would never heal. For weeks, Mirabel fought desperately to save Danielle, running from pillar to post in search of money. But every door remained closed, every plea unanswered. Danielle's tiny body grew weaker, and one morning, the machines went silent. Mirabel's scream tore through the hospital corridors as she clutched her lifeless daughter to her chest, rocking her and begging her to wake up. "Please, Danielle, don't leave me. You're all I have." But her prayers fell on deaf ears. Death had taken the only light in her dark world. When Raymond heard the news, he didn't even visit the hospital. Instead, he threw a party with Selena, celebrating his so-called freedom. To him, Danielle's death meant one less burden, and Mirabel's tears meant nothing. Alone at the graveside, Mirabel fell to her knees and swore, "I will never forgive you, Raymond Morgan. God will judge you for every tear you made me shed." Her heart was broken beyond repair, her soul crushed, and her will to live gone. She wandered the streets aimlessly, her vision blurred by tears, unaware of the danger around her. Mirabel walked aimlessly through the city, her eyes swollen, her mind clouded with grief. She didn't see the car speeding down the road until it was too late. The screech of tires and the crash of impact sent her tumbling to the ground. The driver rushed out, horrified, and the crowd gathered. It wasn't just anyone. It was Alexander Cole, a billionaire CEO and Raymond's boss. He quickly ordered his driver to rush her to the hospital, his face filled with guilt and worry. For days, Mirabel drifted between life and death, her body broken but her spirit clinging to survival. Alexander stayed by her side, canceling meetings and demanding the best care for her. When she finally opened her eyes, weak and trembling, he introduced himself gently and asked what had brought her to such a state. With tears streaming, Mirabel told him everything, from the loveless marriage to Danielle's death to Raymond's cruelty and betrayal. Alexander was stunned. He had known Raymond as a competent employee, but never imagined he could be so heartless. Something stirred within him, pity, compassion, and eventually something stronger, admiration for the strength of the broken woman lying before him. As Mirabel recovered, Alexander made it his mission to help her heal. He ensured she lacked nothing: good food, quality medical care, and comfort. But more than material things, he gave her what she had been starved for years: kindness. He listened to her stories, wiped her tears, and encouraged her to see herself not as a victim, but as a survivor. Slowly, Mirabel began to feel a warmth she hadn't felt in years, a reminder that love could exist in the world. Alexander admired her resilience. Despite all she'd endured, she still carried grace in her heart. Their bond grew stronger each day. Alexander's world, filled with boardrooms and luxury, felt strangely incomplete until Mirabel's presence filled it. For the first time, he wanted to share not just his wealth, but his soul. Mirabel, though cautious, found herself drawn to him. She was terrified of trusting another man after Raymond, but Alexander's sincerity chipped away at her fears. For the first time in years, she smiled, not because of Danielle's memory, but because someone was making her feel alive again. The storm in her life was slowly giving way to a sunrise. Alexander decided it was time to expose Raymond for the monster he truly was. He organized a grand gala night at the company headquarters, inviting influential figures, employees, and shareholders. Raymond walked in proudly with Selina on his arm, unaware that his downfall awaited him. Dressed in elegance, Mirabel arrived at Alexander's side, her beauty radiant and her presence commanding attention. The whispers filled the room. "Isn't that Raymond's wife?" But she's with the CO. When the speeches began, Alexander took the stage. He praised resilience, integrity, and loyalty, then turned to Raymond and announced his termination in front of everyone. Gasps filled the room as Alexander revealed details of Raymond's cruelty, his neglect of his family, and his shameless affair. Selina's face turned pale. She realized the money train had stopped. That same night, she stole what little Raymond had left and disappeared. Humiliated and abandoned, Raymond tried to approach Mirabel, but she turned away coldly. For once, the tables had turned. The woman he mocked as burden now stood beside a billionaire, while he was left with nothing but regret. Raymond Morgan could barely recognize himself when he woke up the morning after the gala. His name, once respected in corporate circles, had become a subject of ridicule overnight. His phone buzzed endlessly, but instead of congratulations or business calls, it was flooded with mockery. Selina had drained his accounts and fled, leaving him penniless. He searched for her in every club, hotel, and luxury apartment they once visited, but she was gone without a trace. Now homeless, Raymond wandered the streets, a shadow of the proud man who once mocked his wife and child. Desperate, he swallowed his pride and went to Mirabel. He stood outside Alexander Cole's mansion, watching her from a distance as she laughed softly with Alexander during an evening walk in the garden. His heart ached, not from love, but from the realization of what he had lost. "Mirabel!" he called, his voice breaking. She froze but refused to turn. He tried again, louder this time, begging, "Please, just hear me out." But Mirabel's resolve was solid as stone. She walked inside without acknowledging him, leaving Raymond crushed by the weight of his own regrets. For the first time, he felt what it meant to be truly abandoned. For Mirabel, healing was a journey she had never thought possible. Danielle's memory remained fresh, her loss etched deep within her heart. But Alexander's presence became a balm to her wounds. He encouraged her to see therapists, took her on short retreats away from the city, and surrounded her with genuine care. He never pushed her to forget Danielle or to stop grieving. Instead, he encouraged her to carry her daughter's memory as strength, not weakness. Slowly, Mirabel's smile returned, and her laughter, though soft, was real. Alexander admired her resilience, but what captivated him most was her heart. Despite all she had endured, she never grew bitter. Instead, she turned her pain into compassion, volunteering at orphanages and speaking softly to children who reminded her of Danielle. Alexander knew then that she wasn't just a woman to be pitied. She was a woman to be loved. He found himself falling deeper every day, not just because of her beauty, but because of the courage and grace she carried. Mirabel was rediscovering herself, and with each passing moment, she realized that her life didn't end with Danielle's death. Perhaps it was just beginning. Meanwhile, Raymond's life spiraled out of control. Without a job, his so-called friends abandoned him. Creditors circled like vultures, demanding repayment of debts he had long ignored. His once proud appearance was replaced with shabby clothes, unkempt hair, and eyes filled with despair. He tried begging Selena's old acquaintances for help, but they laughed in his face. "You thought you were untouchable, Raymond. Look at you now, nothing but a beggar." It wasn't just poverty that haunted him. It was the echo of his daughter's final moments. At night, he heard Danielle's weak voice calling, "Daddy." It pierced his soul, reminding him of the life he could have saved. Guilt consumed him, gnawing at what little sanity remained. But whenever he thought of Mirabel, he convinced himself that perhaps she would still forgive him, that she could still be manipulated into helping. He didn't understand that the woman he once crushed had risen from the ashes, and she would never again bow to his cruelty. One evening, Alexander invited Mirabel to his private estate, a serene garden filled with roses and fountains. As the moonlight bathed them, he finally spoke the words he had held in his heart for months. "Mirabel, I know you've been through unimaginable pain. I won't pretend to replace what you've lost, but I want to be the man who makes sure you never cry alone again. I love you." His voice was steady, yet filled with vulnerability. Mirabel was stunned. Her heart raced, torn between fear of betrayal and the warmth of genuine love. She thought of Danielle, of the promise she once made to never let another man hurt her. But when she looked into Alexander's eyes, she saw no deception, only sincerity. Tears welled up as she whispered, "I don't know if I'm ready, but I feel safe with you." It wasn't full acceptance, but it was the beginning of something real. For Alexander, it was enough. He vowed to wait as long as it took for her heart to fully open. Raymond returned once more, this time in rags. His pride was gone, his voice broken. He waited outside Alexander's office, begging to see Mirabel. The employees whispered and laughed at him, unable to reconcile the image of their former colleague with the wreck he had become. When Mirabel saw him, her heart clenched, not with love, but with sorrow at how far he had fallen. "Mirabel, please," Raymond pleaded, dropping to his knees. "I've lost everything. Selena is gone. I was wrong. Forgive me. Take me back." His words were desperate, but Mirabel's face was calm. She bent slightly and whispered, "I begged you to save Danielle, and you handed me divorce papers. That moment, you buried any chance of forgiveness. There is nothing left between us." With that, she walked away, leaving Raymond collapsed on the floor. For him, it was a final nail in the coffin. As Raymond languished in poverty, Selena enjoyed the luxury she had stolen. But greed is a danger companion. She soon gambled most of the stolen money away and found herself in trouble with dangerous men. Desperate, she attempted to return to Raymond, only to find him a shell of the man she once used. Disgusted, she abandoned him for good, vanishing into the shadows with no trace. Raymond realized too late that Selena had never loved him. She had been the poison that drove him deeper into destruction. Every cruel laugh, every mocking word she whispered in Mirabel's presence now echoed in his ears. Betrayal cut deeply, but it was nothing compared to the regret of losing his wife and daughter. Selena's departure left him truly alone, with nothing but memories of his cruelty. Alexander encouraged Mirabel to dream again. He invested in her passion for children, helping her establish a foundation in Danielle's memory. The Danielle Morgan Foundation provided medical care for underprivileged children, ensuring no mother would ever have to watch her child die due to lack of money. For Mirabel, it was a healing process, turning her grief into hope for others. The foundation became a success, earning her recognition and respect. Mirabel no longer lived in the shadows of her past. She was a voice for mothers, a beacon of resilience. Every time she stood before a crowd to speak, she carried Danielle's memory proudly. And every time she returned home, Alexander was there, her anchor, her reminder that life could be beautiful again. Raymond made one last attempt to reach Mirabel. Weak, sickly, and homeless, he staggered to the gates of the foundation during one of her events. The crowd gasped as he fell to his knees, his voice hoarse. "Mirabel, forgive me. I was blind. Please, don't leave me like this." His tears fell onto the pavement, but Mirabel's eyes remained firm. She stepped closer, her voice steady yet sharp. "Raymond, forgiveness is not a door you can walk into when it suits you. You shut that door when you abandon your daughter. I will never hate you, but I will never go back to you either. Your choices have consequences, and you must live with them." With that, she turned and walked back inside, leaving Raymond behind as the crowd murmured in pity. For him, it was truly the end. Months passed, and Mirabel finally found the courage to accept Alexander's love fully. At a quiet dinner, she held his hands and whispered, "You've shown me love I never thought I'd find again. Yes, Alexander, I will build a future with you." His face lit up with joy as he kissed her hand, promising to cherish her for the rest of their lives. Their engagement became a symbol of triumph over pain. Society, once quick to mock her as a burden, now admired her strength and celebrated her love story. Alexander didn't just marry a woman. He married a survivor who had turned tragedy into triumph. Together, they began planning a life that honored Danielle's memory while building new happiness. On their wedding day, Mirabel walked down the aisle in a gown that shimmered like hope reborn. As Alexander took her hand, she felt a peace she had never known. Danielle's absence was felt deeply, but Mirabel imagined her daughter smiling from heaven, proud of the woman she had become. For once, Mirabel's tears were of joy, not sorrow. Far away, Raymond sat on a park bench, a broken man watching life move on without him. He had begged, pleaded, and cried, but forgiveness never came. His punishment wasn't prison or poverty. It was living with the knowledge that he had destroyed his own family. Mirabel never forgave him, and she never would. But as she stood beside Alexander, radiant and free, she realized she no longer needed to hold on to the past. Her freedom was forgiveness to herself, not to Raymond. And with that, her new life began, a life where she was no longer a burden, but a woman reborn from ashes into grace. That's the end of the story. What did you learn about the story? Please leave a like and subscribe to our channel for more interesting stories. Thanks for watching.